Welcome to Directionally Correct, a Peanuts podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, James Birchler, executive leadership coach and startup technical advisor.
Go.
Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. We are a listener-supported podcast, so please consider becoming a patron. If you'd like to support the podcast by becoming a patron, you can find a link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for being a listener. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
Oh, yeah. What's up, James? Good to see you, man.
It's great to see you too. And it's nice to meet you, Cole.
Nice to meet you, James.
I was promised a cooking demonstration during this show. I'm like wildly disappointed.
Well, there's cooking, which, can be complicated and challenging. And then there's getting the camera and audio and lighting set up properly to make it a great experience. And I wasn't going to just give you a bad cooking experience because the details matter.
Yeah. Scott told me that, James, you're not a half-asser and you're not going to half-ass cooking on this podcast, by God. So, well done, sir.
I don't want it to reflect poorly on any of us, frankly.
No, we do that fine on our own, right? What's your specialty? Like you're gonna whip us something up. What would you have whipped us up?
It's morning where I am, and I was just gonna throw together some crêpes, à la française. So crepes, but most people, I don't know if people make these at home, but like I do, my kid loves them. And I just thought I could just whip these up. And it seems sort of impressive when you're throwing eggs and flour around on the fly. And then, you've got like special tools. Like, yes, I have special crepe making tools, a special pan made in France and all the solid stuff and a little turner. But it was going to be kind of fun. And also they're delicious.
People who know me know that I'm cooking illiterate, and you could say culturally illiterate too. So can you explain to me, James, what's the difference between a crepe and a pancake? To me, they always kind of look the same.
Would you like the philosophical treatise on this, or would you like the honest truth, which is like, there's not much difference. It's like they're both pancake things you eat for breakfast. The ingredients are typically pretty close to the same. I don't think there's much difference, but the presentation and the preparation's pretty different,
Okay.
Crepe just sounds more ostentatious, right? Like,
I know. If you're going to go on someone else's podcast, you're not going to make pancakes, but you can get away with making crepe.
I do love walking into like a good, I don't even know what you call like a cuisine store. I don't know, like where they sell pots and pans, like the high end stuff, where it's like, I need a crepe pan specifically for this, right? Like, and I'm going to hang it over my stove.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, I'm basically like a cast iron cooking person. But people gift me things, and this pan was a gift from someone who was like, "Oh, if anyone would appreciate this, it would be James." They were correct. Like, I do appreciate stuff like that, but like you can do the same thing on any like cast iron. Works great.
The innovativeness, though. The innovation in all the cooking utensils is just insane.
They're like, I'm trying to think like now, what specialized cooking utensils do I have? Like the wooden spatula thing that you use to turn the crepes, it's kind of specialized. It almost looks like a little mini. It's like a knife. It's like a flat wooden knife, and it's very like it's got like a blade edge all around it, so you can kind of get under the edge without tearing.
Oh,
but it's flat, so it's big enough that you can get enough of the crepe and turn the thing without it cutting through. And I like that
all the gadgets.
In addition to you being a culinary genius, I believe you're also a coaching genius as well. I know you're probably going to take issue with my framing of this.
You're way too kind, but I'll take it any way I can get it. I do love coaching, and I've been doing it for a long time. And over the course of my career, what I realized was that the real value that I was bringing to teams, even and perhaps especially technical teams, was my ability to coach the people on the team and then the team together in ways that were kind of unique relative to other leaders around. So yeah, I love it.
I was always confused by this in like grad school. Like people would graduate and, they're ostensibly, 27 years old and they'd say like, I am now an executive coach. I'm like, you?
Yeah,
What the
nobody's
fuck?
listening to you.
What the fuck do you know? What the
Yeah.
fuck do you know? So like,
Same. I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. And then over the course of time and, with the advent of I learned some things. I actually think it's possible that someone that's 27 could be a really excellent executive coach. And the reason is that some of the skills used when you're coaching don't require particular levels of expertise in any domain other than how to listen carefully and help connect dots for people that they might be missing. So it's like those are really core skills.
Okay, you just triggered me. I'm sorry. Isn't that kind of what a therapist does too? Like, don't therapists do like the same thing?
But at a different level, yes. Yeah. So therapy is going really deep on a thing, and coaches don't really go deep on those things. So here's an example. Most people have traits, traits that you were born with or traits that you learned from adults around you when you were little and growing up. And, traits have pros and cons, and you can use them as strengths if you are aware of them. But so coaches, in my coaching, I help people understand what their traits are so that we can do that, leverage them as strengths and understand when they're weaknesses. But someone might say oh, but this is really interesting that I have this particular trait. How is it that I'm always so calm and under stress? And it's I know it's because of this thing that happened with my dad. And then if they want to go deep on what happened with their dad, that's where I refer out for therapy. But if it's really just, hey, you have this trait, let's figure out how to use it. And we just keep it at that kind of superficial level. That's what coaches do.
Or it's Xanax. Like, why am I so calm? You're heavily medicated. That's what's going on.
Right. Yeah. If someone divulges that they're doing that, I could be like, well, didn't you say something about that?
We're actually not even in a coaching session right now. You're really just asleep, and this is a dream.
You have a personality disorder. Like, you don't feel things. That's what's going on. That's the real truth here. But I met James through a series of interviews around innovation, and I've noticed that I've conducted just a million of these sort of things, and I noticed that people have this reaction oh, I don't know, I don't have anything to say about innovation, and then by the end it's almost like therapy. They're knocking on my door hey, one more thing, and James one of the best people to approach about this subject, just because he had so much to say about the path and where we're going wrong with innovation potential. Where do you see it fitting in, especially with the world of Gen AI and ostensibly we're not that far away from generalized artificial intelligence?
Oh yeah. I mean, innovation in general. I mean, how we met, Scott, was really fun because I don't know how you got my name, but I do know that you probably weren't expecting such a leaning in kind of reaction to the innovation question, because I was like, oh, good. I'm glad we're talking about that because I have been steeped in innovation for a very long time professionally, and I think also personally, because I think there's a certain kind of thinking style that lends itself to entrepreneurship and things. But so before I went, so right now I'm a technical advisor to a VP of routing and planning at Amazon. Before I did that, I spent 22 years leading technical teams at startups. And one of the interesting things about being at Amazon, coming out of that startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem, is just seeing how very different large companies innovate or try to innovate versus smaller companies. And you think about what do startups even do and how are they different than a big company? Because startups just don't get bigger and remain a startup. Startups find and invent new things.
Yeah.
Big companies develop those new things and monetize them and make them efficient and scale them. And those are where you see the management tools that big companies use to just extract as much value out of an innovation as possible, versus startups that are just hey, we're trying things. We're trying to find product market fit. We're trying to see what our potential customers or who they even are, but then what are they actually trying to do and what works. And startups are built for that. Well, the good ones are built for continuous learning, continuous iteration, quick, efficient learning and iteration, in the lean startup style. So yeah, I think a lot about, I worked at the very first lean startup with Eric Ries, who wrote the book, The Lean Startup. I worked with him at 2 startups actually. And yeah, so I think a lot about how we can continuously learn and innovate. And I'm excited about the advent of AI. And what you mean, like a tech startup versus like a small business? I think that before mom and pop started the crate store, like they didn't have a small business and they needed to like create a company. And that's kind of a startup. And at some level, maybe, if I were doing this, I'd be like, okay, well, what is the recipe I'm going to use? And is it going to be, am I going to take advantage of the market for gluten-free crepes and pancakes or not? Because like, by the way, if you know anybody though that has celiac disease, you will know that like what a bummer it is for a huge group of people to not be able to go to like restaurants, and particularly breakfast restaurants. So there might be, depending on your brain style, and you can see where I'm going with this as I'm opening a crepe store. I'm like, okay, how can I really be thoughtful about opening this little restaurant? Which for me, that's a startup. Like, and it's not a tech startup necessarily, but it's a brand new business. And, maybe I'm just going to establish a product and just churn it out and make it efficient and just like, hey, let's franchise. But that's a way to run a business. But what in in tech startup land, and I started out in tech startups before the first .com boom and bust cycle. So kind of a long time ago now. So like early 2000s, let's say 1999, 2000. And the way things used to be built when you ran a startup was you had kind of a visionary leader person that kind of had a golden gut, kind of in Steve Jobs style. And everyone followed that leader, and you trusted that leader's judgment and decision of like what you're going to build. And so the startup that I was at, first Silicon Valley startup that I was at, was called there.com. And we were building a virtual world the size of Earth. And that turned out to be important because I come from a geography background, and we wanted to use the geographic information system to keep track of all the 3D virtual stuff we were going to build. Anyway, that's how I fell into startups. But the idea was you take a lot of money, you develop your product in secret. So we total stealth mode. It was hilarious. So you develop in stealth mode, and then you get ready for a big bang release of the thing. And it's like everybody's rich and famous. So that was kind of the model. But what there.com did was collect and spend like $250 million without releasing a product really to customers. And we didn't even really talk to that many customers. We were just building stuff that like the founders wanted and thought would be cool. And, but it didn't really work. So when we started testing it out in friends and family, people are like, it's kind of fun to have an avatar that has a jetpack and I can fly around and shoot paintballs at the other people flying around. But like when I want to go somewhere, why do I have to fly for 6 hours? Because remember, the thing's the size of Earth. And we built in functioning physics, which was a lot of hard math and a lot of complexity to manage. So like when you shot the paintball, it would lose altitude with gravity, which,
you need that.
Why?
You need that, man.
Like customers that just want to have fun in a virtual environment really don't care if the physics.
Yeah, I was like, you guys spent way too much time on that.
Yeah. And so anyway, so it was a great way to burn up $250 million and not release a product to customers. And so that was kind of like the crucible from which the lean startup idea came from. And Eric, who is a genius, was like, hey, what if we just try to get contact with customers quickly? And so there's this gentleman, Steve Blank, who wrote a great book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And it's really about customer development. And the shorthand is get out of the building and talk to your customer. Yeah. And so we were thinking like, what if we talk to customers right away? And instead of just building and building and building for years and spending hundreds of millions of dollars, we could build what customers actually need to like get whatever job it is done that they're trying to do. And so that's in a nutshell, the first part of lean startup. The next part is how can we take a hypothesis and test it based on, data that we got from customers, and then decide what we're going to do. Were we correct in our hypothesis? Are we going to move forward? Or are we going to pivot and change? Or are we going to kill that idea because that was a terrible idea and then move on to the next thing? And so that's the more of the genius part of Lean Startup, was taking what is essentially the scientific method and applying it to product development. And so the faster you can go through this loop of build, measure, learn, you will eventually and more quickly find your product market fit faster than like that process that I described, where it took years for the company to build all this crazy technology and then never validated it. So by the time we got to the point where it was like, oh, maybe we should try to sell this to customers, it was too late. Yeah. But the visionary leader was very visionary. Just like you could listen to the CEO and the founders talk about this concept, and it was just like, you were like, yes, I will follow this cult. Yes. I mean,
partly anyway.
I think so. I think it helps to be able to tell a good story. How's that? And so I think if you naturally have kind of a storytelling kind of skill, you probably come off as visionary. Like, I can tell great stories about things that I really care about and I'm passionate about. Like Scott knows, and that Cole, like, let's just like open up the innovation discussion topic just for a second, and I can go for like a day without taking a breath. So I think it does help to be able to tell a good story about your product and where you want people to be coordinated together to try to do something that is really hard to do by yourself, which is really why humans tell stories.
I think that what you said there is like really critical as far as like you can be a visionary, right? And like have the greatest idea and like sort of like a, Steve Jobs or whatever, and like wear your black shirt on stage. But like trying to get the team below you to do that is critical as well. And I know you developed the CAMS framework. Does that fit into like developing startups?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it does. So the CAMS framework is a coaching framework, and all it really does is just help kind of disambiguate and clarify what are the modes that you can be in when you're coaching. And one of the articles that you guys pointed me to actually talks about some of the lack of frameworks and lack of structure in coaching. Yeah. So CAMS actually helps with that by just defining like, look, there's kind of a coaching mode, and there's an advising mode, and there's a mentoring mode, and there's a supporting mode. And each of those has different levels of or telling and curiosity or asking. And like real coaching is low tell. So it's non-directive. It's low tell, high ask. So when I'm coaching somebody, I'm just asking a ton of questions, and I don't really tell them to do anything. And in fact, when I'm coaching with someone and I deign to offer something close to advice, the light just goes out of their eyes, and they're just like, what are you like, why are you interrupting essentially the story that I have, my story world that I'm sharing with you, coach? Why are you interrupting that with your context and your story? Like, that's not what I want right now. And so that's
my brain with your ideas, man. Get out of here.
Yeah. And so real coaching is like, it pulls some ideas from a person, taking advantage of like all the context that you would have, Scott, and helps you see like, oh, wow, I do actually probably know some things I can do next to make progress on this thing that's important to me. So that's coaching. And, the other modes are, advising mode is the high tell, low ask mode. And so some people, I have clients who are literally like, look, I'm paying you for your experience and I want your advice. I want to know how you think about this problem. And I'm like, well, I can do that. However, I will always try to redirect them to like, well, what is it that you like? Why do you want this advice? And what is it you're trying to accomplish? Because my context that I have based on, I have 25 years of experience leading technical teams, but unless my context very closely matches like in my, my past experience matches whatever the current context is, it's a challenge that somebody's trying to get through. Like the advice is worth, the joke is here's my advice. It's my 2 cents. It's worth every penny. So that's the advising mode. But sometimes like if there's a dumpster fire happening, like I'm not going to go take somebody through a bunch of questions and try to help them like see like, oh, the fire extinguisher, it's like right there. I'm going to be like, look, here's the fire extinguisher. We're going to put that out. And then in a calm moment, just following, we're going to get right back into like deconstructing, like how did that happen? And then how do you change your, approach to things so that you can manage these things yourself and notice kind of like the fire, and like, so those are two of the modes. Mentoring's kind of in the middle, and supporting, just to call it out, is kind of an important one. Supporting is like in a non-judgmental way, helping people feel seen and validated. It's like, wow, you are really working hard through a lot of challenges. Like you really are working hard. I'm just noticing.
So Eric Ries, he was actually an investor for a startup that I used to work for, which was kind of cool, small world. And you mentioned the lean startup. One of the premises behind it is bringing the scientific method and data into how to, run product design in a startup. And I'm curious, we're talking about coaching and like the CAMS framework. And you mentioned, it's different perhaps for like, coaching like a normal team versus like a technical team. How do you bring like science and data into the coaching world to know if what you're doing is working and being effective?
That's a good question. I think a lot about AI as kind of a technical approach to coaching. And I think about what kind of data can you collect from coaching clients to know, like, were you actually effective? And then how can you trace that back to some of the, modalities that I would use as a coach to know if they were, effective modalities. And what I find in my coaching, my individual coaching, executive coaching, and in coaching and leading teams is that human connection, call it intimacy, is like the most powerful thing that a leader or a coach can leverage. And it's related to trust. There's some, you can look up all kinds of interesting research on trust. One of the references that I use is this book called The Trusted Advisor. And they have this thing called the trust. Do you know it?
Yeah.
They have the trust equation, right?
Yeah, I actually have it written on my whiteboard. It's credibility times reliability times intimacy divided by self-interest.
Yes. Yeah. And so as you will recall, the research indicates that like, yeah, you can have credibility and reliability. And I look at like, yeah, AI agents can definitely be credible and reliable for sure. But how do you get intimacy? Because intimacy is one of the high leverage parts of the trust equation that is probably also the most difficult for some people to take advantage of. And self-orientation is the other one that's high leverage. Like, so like staying focused on the team and others and not yourself is a skill for a lot of people to develop. But those two things, intimacy and low self-orientation, are very, very powerful in establishing trust. And so what I found, to get back to try to answer your question, is just by being a human with other humans, the feedback is like crazy positive. Like people want me to lead teams. People want to connect with me and, ask me for advice or be coached, because all I'm really doing is helping them feel seen and heard in the ways that they want to feel seen and heard. And this goes for people or teams, and people love it. And so, for example, when I joined Amazon, it was to lead it was really to like see what kind of innovation and startup things I could bring to a large scaled part of Amazon, while learning like, hey, how does Amazon do operational excellence at scale, which Amazon is very well known for. So it was like a learning thing. And so to start, we plopped me into the middle of this team called same day delivery. So it's the technical team that writes the routing software and the planning software to do Amazon's fastest delivery methods, which, for a while was, growing very, very quickly. It still is. And so I got in there, and all I really did was say, hey, what's working, what's not working, and what should we be doing differently with the team and with the stakeholders? And then people were like, wow. And then I would repeat back, like, here's what you all said are the challenges. And here's what you also said would relieve the challenges. And so let's do that. And the team's like, we can't do that. Why not? Oh, well, there are all these competing needs. And like, it's like, there's no way we could do it. We'd be in some form of trouble. I'd be like, well, look, I'll be your heat shield. That's what I'm here for. and you just do the right thing, and I'll take care of any of the heat. Well, no heat came because what the team really did was just focus on improving their own infrastructure and their own tooling. And while feeling like really heard, I knew this because Amazon collects data about morale of teams, which went high through the roof with this team when all I was doing what they knew had to be done with its like very little context. And even though we were chatting earlier about the traveling salesperson problem and like my background in geography, and like I didn't have any actual hands-on experience with any of this, either in software or in real life. All I was doing was coming in and just being a human with the team and clearing the way. So everything went great, and so great that the wider team was like, "Hey, could you do this for all of the routing? So take on the whole routing, the larger group of professionals, working on the routing stuff." So I did that, and it was following that, which all I was doing was basically the same thing. And then that's when I was, asked, "Hey, could you be a technical advisor?" Which in Amazon is kind of a big deal. So yeah. So did I answer your question? It's really like
it's very relationship oriented, right? Like, and I think that's the name of the game moving forward as we become more like AI focused, this sort of stuff. And like even in my own interviews, like I mentioned to you a while ago, you start talking to folks, and by the end of like 30 minutes, they're like banging on your door, like, "Hey, I got more to say. Got more to say."
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's human connection and relationship building, and I think more and more about storytelling, and people have studied storytelling for a long time. There's a great book, a couple of great books, a few off top of mind because I've been reviewing them recently. One of them is called The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. I highly recommend. Same with A Story is a Deal, which is also by Will Storr. And then there's another one that I recommend called Stories Sell by this guy named Matthew Dix. And they've studied stories for a long time. Well, anyway, so what people do with stories is they try to identify with others so that they can connect and then and improve status at some level. And status can be things like how well you're perceived by others in a group of like people like me. You're always trying to find other people like you. And the goal of that is to it's kind of uniquely human, actually. It's to do things with a group collectively that are too hard to do on your own. And so storytelling and like why storytelling is even a human thing is directly related to leadership of all kinds. So your ability to connect with others and, share a story is like what Steve Jobs and other visionary leaders can do, is like pull everybody together into a shared story realm,
Well, will you share a story with us as we move into the confusion matrix, James? Let's do some confusion matrix.
The confusion matrix.
I do, like, just very briefly, there is a mode or like a certain flight path you can take on like Microsoft Flight Simulator 18 or whatever the heck the version they're on right now. And it's like, you can take like a 18-hour flight from Germany to like LA. And it's like one of the missions, and it takes 18 full hours on your computer. It's an actual simulation that you take a flight. All right, this is a direct ripoff of the Off Menu podcast, which I absolutely love. Because you're a chef, James. So welcome to your dream restaurant.
Okay.
We got some questions here, you can choose from any meal you've ever had in the past. But we're going to start with, how are we starting the meal? Still or sparkling water?
I think it depends on if it's my restaurant, even the
This is your dream meal. This is like a prison meal.
Okay. Yeah. I'm probably going to have both.
Prison meals can be terrible.
Yeah. A last meal in prison.
If I were doing like my last prison meal, I think I would end up buying a lot of extra time on the planet because it would take so long for people to figure out how to create and make all this stuff at the level of quality that I would want to do it. So I'd be starting with probably both still and sparkling.
Oh,
but the still water was probably going to be like RO water, like reverse osmosis, or something like really pure. So it's not going to have any chlorine or anything like that. It's going to be delicious and thirst quenching. Whereas the sparkling, it can be kind of a palate cleanser. And, it's a little acidic. So, it's got a different thing, but I like a little of both.
You go to a sushi restaurant. Sometimes they have both. Like, I think of sparkling water as spicy water. It's a little much for me. Cole?
I like good, clean water,
Just Just right still. Okay.
I like H2O, just nothing else.
Bread option. What are we doing for bread?
This is interesting. So I like people that are close to me suffer from celiac disease. And so it's hard to find a good bread option to have around those people. But there are some bread-like things, like crackery things that I would have if I was going to have bread. I wouldn't just have bread. I'd have bread with like cheese and kind of a charcuterie situation going on. So probably some various kinds of olives and some, salamis and things like that. Maybe some prosciutto or something. And so I would get like, so I would, if I would just for the bread part, I think I would have some kind of sourdough, some kind of like true sourdough, so a good crust on it to go along with all this stuff. And for the gluten-free crowd, I would probably have something made like crackery stuff it's not masquerading as bread. It's like, we have crackers and they're going to be like the most delicious crackers you've ever had. And we'll probably make them out of potato starch. And
you're getting serious now.
Yeah. So a potato starch based cracker is what I would do for the.
What are you rocking, Cole?
I mean, I like some good buttery bread, good clean bread.
Let's talk
good
butter.
clean water. Yeah.
Let's talk butter. So I like a butter that is like really from grass fed cows, probably somewhere in like Normandy or something, but like with salts, like really flaky salt. You speak my language?
Yeah, I like a good butter. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about like sea salt. Like, what are we talking here? Like where do you get the good flaky salt?
Okay,
I know, like my thing with food is there was like that famous Supreme Court thing about pornography where it's just like I know it when I see it. I know good food when I taste it. I don't know anything that goes into it.
Okay.
Have you had more? Have you had more tasty cheeseburgers than you have steaks?
I mean, I've had good cheeseburgers.
Anybody, yeah.
Steaks.
I mean,
what was that?
I just made cheeseburgers last night, and so I've just switched to a like pure oak charcoal kind of approach, but supplemented with, and this is something I learned at a wedding long ago in Bordeaux, France, which was if you barbecue on some kind of interesting wood, like this group had large format wedding, they literally dug up the earth and put down grapevines that had been seasoned, dried out.
Okay.
And they barbecued everything on grape wood. I mean, it was like insane. So I have rosemary and thyme growing in the garden. And so I throw that
like a little like a luau situation where like you bury it in a pit?
No. It was like they burned a ton of grapevines and then threw like essentially not chain link fence, but like,
chicken
metal fencing over the top of it, right on the ground, and grilled like, enough lamb for a couple hundred people. It was amazing.
Damn.
So, but anyway, the takeaway there is, adding some fresh rosemary and some fresh thyme to the barbecue situation is win for sure.
Final one, very quickly. Like, what's the main dish that you're rocking for your last meal? Your dream meal, not your last meal. Your dream meal.
So this is kind of funny. I could think of a lot of things, but I have recency bias.
Yeah.
So here's the answer, and it's something that I just made the other day. I really wanted. You ever had a rotisserie chicken from a rotisserie chicken truck? So I spent a lot of time around France and south of France, and they're all at every farmer's market. Somebody's got a rotisserie chicken truck, and the chicken is totally delicious. And I was like, okay, I'm going to recreate this somehow. And it was just like random. It was like 4:00 in the afternoon, and I was like, oh, I'm on the hook for dinner. What am I going to do? So I had a whole chicken, and I was like, I'm not making plain roast chicken. But plain roast chicken is a classic thing to get a bunch of foodies together and just be like, let's compare just like roast chicken. Just your only ingredient is salt. So I used, but for this though, I needed salt,
rosemary,
paprika. What's that? No rosemary. But not in this one. This was a little bit of ground fennel, coriander, white pepper, black pepper, thyme, paprika. Paprika was a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting that. And there's one other thing. I hardly ever use this stuff, but like dried garlic and dried onion powder, are just,
Yeah.
there's just something about those. So anyway, I did that all. I didn't marinate it. I just threw it all together, coated the chicken with it, and threw it in an oven. And this was interesting at 250. Okay, so because I knew I
Low
had
and slow.
had
Low and slow.
very low, yeah. And so I put it in at 250 for like 2.5 hours, and then got it up to temp. Because I just come a stickler about 165 on the chicken. So
Yes.
and then let it rest for 20 minutes. It was phenomenal. There was nothing left over, and so that is what I would make. It was so good.
Cole was telling me the exact story at PSYOP.
Yeah. Can't get me to stop talking about it. Wow. I don't know. Scott, I want your answer, Scott. So what would your final meal be?
Boy, there's so much good like Texas. I'll say multiple things. Some like fantastic like Texas barbecue, like brisket from like Terry Black's maybe, coupled with a chicken fried steak from Texas Roadhouse.
There you go.
Yeah, and a buttery, Dr. Pepper. Give me Dr. Pepper.
Those buttery bread that they have at the Texas Roadhouse.
Oh yeah, I want the buttery bread with the cinnamon butter, as well as the butter biscuits from Red Lobster, cheddar biscuits from Red Lobster, and I want to dip it in their like champagne vinaigrette dressing, and give me a molten cake from Chili's at the end.
That's high.
I love it.
Why not?
Pulling it all in. Why not?
Oh yeah.
Oh well.
And the water, I'll take water from my parents' house, who they live in deep East Texas, but they have a well straight to some aquifer, and their water tastes fantastic.
There you go.
Isn't it
my treat meal?
Water.
Cole, hit me with yours very quickly.
Oh goodness, I would probably do some OMG tacos. That's my recency bias. We had those the other day, and it's just this taco place that's close to where I live, and it's like just really freaking good. And I don't know. I'd just probably get some taco.
You can't beat a good taco.
Yeah. But you want to do some nerdery?
Let's do it.
The nerdery. All right. Well, do you want to kick us off, Scott? I couldn't pull it up because of firewalls, but the have humans pass peak brain power.
Yeah, James, did you have issues with this one too? Accessing this one?
No, I got it. Did you guys
sweet.
Not
I gave Cole a dodgy link. I apologize for that. We won't get into any more details beyond that. But like, I have some bad news for you, or at least disturbing. So, a recent study shows that there's a widespread decline in cognitive abilities in, concentration, verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, etc. And they think it might be linked to our consumption of digital media. So the decline started around 2012, and this decline across all age groups, not just like our youngest population. And the biggest decline really happened between 2012 and 2018. So it's not just pandemic, we forgot how to actually think. There's notable declines in difficulty concentrating and difficulties in numeric reasoning, a 25% increase in people that say they can't reason numerically in developed countries. And yeah, I don't know how we come back from this, honestly, because it feels like the train's going down the track. What would say y'all?
So I don't know if this was like really scientific or not, but I think something came across my feed this morning that they were saying how, because we've covered in the past the Flynn effect, that was showing that intelligence was going up, and then more recently it's plateaued and I guess is going down now. But they actually found that it's not true. And it was just that what was being measured changed. And so, again, I don't know if there's any scientific backing to what I'm saying right now. But basically, they were saying like how they used to measure like hard things, and then they measured easier things, and therefore the scores went up. And then they started measuring more difficult things again, and now scores started going down. So I don't know if that overlays with this at all.
It's like when they changed the BMI rating for what obese is. Like, people are no longer obese. Like, hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm no longer fat anymore. Thank goodness. What do you think, James?
So I was intrigued by the article because kind of subjectively and, just from experience, it kind of made sense. So one thing that I notice in myself and others is that doing deep work, or just like being able to focus on something for any amount of time and really do it, it not only takes a certain brain style to do that, because not all brains are built to do this ever, but it gets harder to do when the distractions are more at hand.
yeah.
Okay, so which kind of like it intuitively makes sense that if you are, browsing stuff, scrolling and whatever, it's just so easy to just get a little snippet, a headline, and then go to the next headline, and you're not really going deep on things. And next thing you know, an hour has passed, and you haven't really thought about anything because you keep getting pulled into these other topics. And so that made sense to me. And the part in the article where they called out, like, they're measuring a decline in verbal information processing, attention. I took notes, by the way, working memory and self-regulation. That kind of made sense to me. There's been some research done about how many thoughts people have. And one of the ways I think they measured it was by, like, how many thought transitions do you have in a day? And different brains work in different ways. So not everybody has, 6,000 thoughts a day, but it's right around 6,000 thoughts a day. And those researchers were tracking, various, mental health issues related to the switching. And the higher the switching was correlated with a few more mental health challenges. Okay, so I was like kind of connecting those dots, going like, well, how interesting. And so I don't think, though, Scott, that we are like, I don't think the train has left the station forever. I think we can stop it, because one of the things that I work with people on is metacognition. Do you guys know metacognition? It's like thinking about how you think. Another way to think of it, to say this, is self-awareness. Like,
Yeah.
well, no, it's more like, how, like, can you notice the voice in your head that is constantly narrating your reality? Like, do you?
Yeah.
And the way that the example I use that seems to always click with people is I say, well, the first time I noticed it was, I grew up driving near Los Angeles, and I think LA drivers are by far the best, even though it's kind of like an insane thing to be part of. But when people are people are also like yelling a lot out their windows, not at me, never at me. But like, so I learned, like, when someone cuts me off on the freeway, like, I have this very negative thing to say about them and their motivations and their history, which none of it is true. And what's really, but when I heard that, when I was like, oh yeah, that's like that, and I noticed, like, that's totally not true. They probably have a really good reason for not having taken a second to just notice I was there. Glad there wasn't an accident. For all I know, they're on the way to the ER to, spend their
Fundamental
last loved one,
attribution.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's your inner dialogue. And so if you can notice that, that means you can then, instead of reacting, like in the moment, you can thoughtfully respond to what's happening. And so you're slowing down this kind of automatic reaction that everyone's brain likes to have, because we're all trying to process something like 11 billion bits of information, like a second or something. And we can only process between like 10 and 50 bits. And so the more that your brain can do automatically, the better for, handling it all. But the only problem with that is that when you're doing something automatically, you're doing it based on context that may not matter anymore. So you've learned something, but does the context presently match why I'm doing this? Usually not, but we don't, unless you stop and go like, wait a second, is this true? Is this like, should I really react like this right now? Does the context match? That's metacognition, being able to do that.
Yeah.
Having self-awareness. And so by noticing like what's happening while you're like doom scrolling for hours, like, you can be like, wait a second, I'm not thinking, I'm just scrolling. Let me make a choice here, a conscious choice to do something else. And so I really think that if we can help people be better at and have a more enhanced self-awareness, better metacognition, I think you can kind of reverse things and go like, you know what, I'm going to consciously choose to do some deep thinking right now.
Yeah.
So,
I know somehow, somewhere, Tillman Sheets, which is Scott and I's advisor, screaming in agreement at the podcast about metacognition, because that's where I learned about the concept from. But I always know that if somebody cuts me off in traffic, they're a jerk. But if I cut somebody else off in traffic, I have a good reason.
Yeah.
Like that.
Right.
That's how it works.
I will say, like, as a self-admitted doom scroller, I see a lot of people a lot of people, particularly young people, talking about how they have ADHD and like how they can't concentrate. And like, is it chicken or the egg? Like, are they creating more people that, claim that they have ADHD by saying this sort of stuff? It's probably apocryphal.
There's like a social contagion to it or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of cool to, claim that you can't concentrate, sort of thing.
Better than the insidious version, which is you're being programmed to not be able to concentrate.
Well, I mean, that could be happening too. Like, apparently, like TikTok in China has a lot more like STEM sort of content involved, like actual like thinking sort of engagements. But Steve Jobs and, oh God, Bill Gates here in Seattle, apparently they once said like the key to success is just straight concentration, being able to focus on things.
Yeah.
Which I guess
I believe that. Like we see that in lean manufacturing. So lean startup came out of lean ideas from manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the ultimate lean manufacturing situation is called single piece flow. Because the Toyota production system and the Andon core, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you could do
I used to work at Toyota.
Excellent. So
he's a factory worker.
Yeah, so you get it. And so like we use these with teams to do things like, hey, can we not have like 11D projects going at the same time because we make little progress on any of them? And can we just get one thing done and just get it really done with high quality? And that's where we can use that sort of lean concept of just like, hey, let's work on fewer things and have higher quality. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's hit you with the next nerdery article. So, article from Frontiers in Psychology called Workplace Coaching, a meta-analysis and recommendations for advancing the science of coaching, which I kind of alluded to earlier. The thing I just absolutely love scientific articles that have kind of funny results, in my opinion. So what did they find? At the highest level is just coaching is related to achieving positive organizational outcomes. And it kind of doesn't matter what you do. Just do the coaching. So what doesn't matter is it process facilitation based or outcome and goal setting based? It doesn't matter if you're focusing on effective outcomes, cognitive outcomes, skill-based outcomes. It doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or virtual. It doesn't matter the number of times you do it or the total hours that you were doing it. It doesn't matter if the source of evaluation was self-report, supervisor, or subordinate. All that matters is just do some coaching, and it's related to positive outcomes. There's no statistical differences amongst any of the different kinds. And I thought this was hilarious, but also informative. So I'll tee it to you, James. How did you react to this one?
I had a similar reaction. I was just like, really? Does it not matter? But since I think about this stuff a lot, I realized one of the things that coaching gives people is that human connection and that ability for a person to feel like understood and heard. And I think that's like a through line through all of this. So no matter what mode you're using, you are a human connecting with another human, leveraging context and, being able to intuit when, like, I think really good coaches know how to flip between what I call those 4 modes, which, maps to some of the modalities in the article, but like flipping between, when do you coach? When do you advise? When do you compare experiences through mentorship and see what learnings there are? And when do you just simply support someone and just, create space to be together and notice like, wow, that was really hard what you did. So it's a human thing to be able to do that versus, and I think a lot about like, hey, is AI going to replace coaching?
Yeah.
And kind of because of the trust, because I think the trust equation is really an insightful tool. Like, I don't think so because of intimacy. Like, it's a very different thing to connect with a human because we've all, for thousands of years through evolution, just like connecting with other humans is a very human thing. I think it's going to be hard for machines to replace that kind of, like, I make a decision in a coaching session to stop somebody because I notice that the look on their face changed when they said a particular word and it was clearly meaningful for them. And that is a moment to just like pause everything and sit with that for a second. Whereas I think maybe someday a machine can do that, but I think that's still a fair ways off.
I've seen like several of these sort of like coaching bots sort of be thrown out there, and like I've had the similar reaction. Like you really need, as we come more down the line of everything's artificial, I think that the value of someone real is going to take on exponential value. Like be it like a real human connection, or be it like a real video that you can watch and see, or what, or a real podcast where people are, they fuck up when they talk and all this sort of stuff. Tangential point, I had a realization like early this week. Like I use ChatGPT on my home computer, and like it just one day just popped up. It's like, hey, we can now memorize everything about you. And like you are Scott Hines, you're a network analytic IO psychologist, and you do innovation research, and you do all these, like, you love Star Trek, and you all this sort of shit that I've plugged in the past 3 years or whatever. And I was thinking like, damn, like all growing up, you would watch these movies, and it was like, Hal from 2001 Space Odyssey, or like, I don't know, fucking like Rosie the Robot from Jetsons. And you're like, I would interact with that personality of AI. They have their own personality. I have my own personality. But what the AI is doing is kind of like being a reflection, like a mirror, is kind of seeing how you are, and kind of being a mirror of back of what you put into it, which is unexpected, at least.
Well, it's kind of weird if you think about it.
Yeah.
You don't get Rosie the Robot. You get the AI from her, which is more of like highly psychological, highly analyzing you all the time.
Exactly.
But not necessarily an independent persona, which is, I think, what you're saying you want to engage with.
No, I'm not saying what I want to engage, it's what I expected to engage with.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have this like thought train anytime I'm interacting with an AI agent, is like it's not a real human, right? And I like, do they really, like, this thing doesn't actually care? And I think care is a word that, like, I think is important for humans, because like, does anyone really care? And it's like, yeah, you want to know that like another human cares. It's part of the status thing with storytelling. It's like, do I have value here? Am I providing value to the group that I'm part of, or the groups that I'm part of? So I just think AI is going to struggle to do that in an authentic way, like a human way, a real way.
Well, I think that's the problem. Is I think what's going to be even worse than it not caring is that it's going to algorithmically care for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then my brain's like, I wonder what's in the algorithm.
Yeah.
I want to see it. Show me the code.
You want to hit us with the next one, Scott?
This one we carried over from PsyOp because we ran out of time that time. We all love to vent about our coworkers and whatever. So obviously that's an expression of negative emotions to coworkers. It's common, right? But like no one's really researched it. So what they did is they conducted 2 experience sample studies on how people react to people venting to them. And what they found is, you won't fucking believe this, but receiving venting led to personal distress, and in some cases empathy, resulting respectively in recipients engaging in further venting themselves, i.e. they're distressed and then that leads to them venting, or if they perceived it as empathy, they were engaged in some helping behaviors. But importantly, higher coworker similarity, so the homophily aspect, amplified the empathy reaction. So the more you empathize with your coworker, the more you're like them, the more likely you are to empathize with whatever they have going on.
Yeah. I had 2 reactions when I first read this. One is like, it doesn't feel good to get dumped on at work. Like the
trauma dump
another
on
word
your
for, venting is like you dumping all your shit onto someone else. But then I also thought about kind of back to what James's point from earlier about the trusted advisor and the formula for trust, is there's like a short-term, long-term thing with venting. In the short term, yeah, venting, might not have the best thing, like the best connotations at work. In the long term, I bet you I'm closer to that person, right? Whether or not I received the venting or gave the venting or both, I probably have a higher level of trust with them because I know they're willing to kind of open up about something, and again, like,
Totally.
be intimate in that way in the workplace.
It is social cohesion. And for me, when I saw this article, I was like, oh man, it's storytelling all over again. It turns out one of the reasons why humans told stories early on in small groups of humans, out on the plains roaming around, was all about social cohesion. And you would gossip to keep people in line.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
and
Yeah.
and the other outcome was like those people would be outcasts or just killed from the group. And so gossip really plays that role. And so I was thinking like it's another chicken and egg thing. Like, were you closer to the person after the gossip, or is it all it was like a validation of social, are we part of the same group or not? Like, how are you going to respond? Are you going to be empathetic with me? Are we part of the same group? Do you see things the way I do? Do we share the same story or not? Or can I move you a little bit into my story world, by sharing this gossip?
In group, out group, I mean, like, you can just go to a high school and study this sort of like formative behaviors. I think it's Fowler and Christakis in their book Connected. They have like a whole like chapter on the evolution of groups and group membership. Like, some people are like genetically predetermined to be like loners, and like they're kind of untouchable. And like they can do whatever they want from a gossip standpoint. Like, fuck it, like I'm not going to be socially constrained. But then they lack trust, right? You're on the outside looking in, and people don't trust you. But I got a story from a friend who's relaying that they were in high school and something was said where the person was wrong. And like, so two girls getting into it about, being wrong. And a third girl came in and said like, hey, sticking up for their friend who was definitely wrong in the situation. Is like, why are you sticking up for her? She's wrong. It's like, yeah, I know, but she's my friend and you're not. And that's it. Like, it's cohesion, baby. It doesn't matter if you got the math problem wrong.
It's like, are we in pursuit of truth, or are we just trying to keep our friends? It's good to have friends, Maybe that's a good wrapping point for the podcast. It's good to
have your back no matter what, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, and here's to new friends. It's nice to be together with you two on a different level than before with you, Scott. We spoke mainly about innovation ad infinitum. And then Cole, it's been really nice to meet you and get to know you through your food. I know that you guys ever find yourselves with me in the kitchen. I know what I'm making for you both.
Oh, fantastic. James, how can folks reach out to you? Should they want to get in contact?
Yeah, I've, the eponymous website, jamesbirchler.com is a good place to go. There are links there to my LinkedIn profile and, my coaching philosophy, links off to my Substack, which is continuous growth, and my Maven courses where I do cohort-based teaching of some of this stuff.
Well, fantastic. Well, James, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, James Birchler. Thanks for joining us, James. I want to say a big thank you to our new patrons of the podcast, Shane McKnight and John Catman. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast.